Hello! In this video, we're going to have a closer look at one of the most important sources that you will need in your OBS setup, namely the webcam. So you can use it in your live and recorded sessions. Webcams are crucial as they show you, the teacher, and you want it to look as good as possible. So if you ever wanted to improve your online looks, then keep watching this video. My name is Gerd Christandl. I'm an online educator and learning technologist at the University of Greenwich, London, UK. I share tips, how-tos and tutorials to help you build your digital skills in your online and hybrid teaching needs. If you want to stay in the loop, hit that subscribe button below, turn on notifications to avoid missing new videos released on this channel. Cheers! With that said, let's roll! In my last video, I've introduced you to very important features of the OBS studio, namely profiles, scenes, scene collections, sources, and transitions. Amongst the sources, as I've pointed out in the last video, webcams are probably one of the most important ones next to audio. We will talk about audio setup and microphone setup in a separate video. In this video, we will set up, or starting to set up, our 3 scenes by establishing how to set up our webcam, how to bring in multiple webcams in our OBS studio, and how to best start in setting it up by creating it as a nested scene setting. Now, when we're talking about webcam, it is absolutely crucial that we start outside OBS. Namely with the lighting. And the lighting in the place where you intend to record your videos and where you intend to do your live sessions from. The best webcam will fail you if you're not well lit up in front of the camera. If you have natural light, maybe from a window coming from the front and lighting your face, that's ideal. But of course, that would mean that you cannot record or stream at any time during the day. So if you prefer to record your sessions in the evenings or at night, because it's quiet and less distracting, then you might not have the luxury of natural lights to be used. I have a very small room here, so right now I'm sitting in a very small home office. I would have a window to my left-hand side, but it lights me up very unevenly. So my left side would be lit up during the day, be bright, but my right side would be in the shadows, which gives me an uneven look. What you want is something from the front, but of course something that doesn't blind you. So putting there a lamp might not quite cut it. So what you might want to do is invest in a ring light, for instance. Ring lights don't need much space. My ring light, for instance, is just installed above my screens on a shelf and shines at me directly. It's a ring light that cost me the equivalent of about £20–25. That's not a big investment, and it gives you the options to change the light intensity, the brightness, even the warmth of the lighting. So you might experiment around which light is best for you. So right now the ring light is pointed at me, and to just give you an idea of the difference, if I switch the light off, and now you see me, I'm sitting in the shadow, and of course my green screen is also not well lit, which is necessary to make the green screen work. You see a massive improvement. With light, there is no other way to experiment. If you have the space in your home office or in any spot in your house or flat, where you can put up soft boxes, that would be even better, because soft boxes you can place on each side of your desk, and you can experiment which lighting settings do you need to set up so you're evenly lit from around. So when you look at my face now, how it's lit up, it's better. It could even be better if I had the space to put up soft boxes, but soft boxes are quite junky, quite big. Not everybody has the space for it. They're not overly costly. You get a good set for a good price these days. I can leave a link in the description below for a couple of reviews on soft boxes and ring lights. But we need to make sure that the lighting beyond OBS is good. That even benefits you even if you do not use OBS. If you decide after this video series, you know what, OBS is not for me, even then, good lighting for a direct video feed into MS Teams or Zoom will be beneficial to you. It looks better, it makes you look lively. Once you have the lighting worked out, then we can work on the webcam itself. Now you need to decide which webcam are you using. So many of us last year have tried to make do with their either university laptops or the personal laptops with the inbuilt camera. We all know that view, right? Yeah, when you have a laptop camera, you kind of hunched over it, and your students would see you basically from below. That's not the most flattering of perspectives. You would prefer a perspective of the webcam that points straight at you, that shows a little bit more of you. You see me right now, you see my face, shoulders, part of my upper body. Typically the built-in webcams in laptops are not of the greatest quality. I mean, that's kind of a given, because these webcams need to be very small to fit in the lid of a laptop. So you can't expect a high-quality camera feed from a laptop camera. Very often they pass as acceptable, but they could be better. Nowadays you can get good webcams, decent webcams. It doesn't have to be 4K, but it should be a 1080p webcam, ideally, for reasonable prices online. But you might want to have a look and invest in a good webcam, such as the one that I'm using. Has been around for a couple of years by now, for quite some time. That's the Logitech C920. So the hardware and beyond OBS, that needs to be set up. And then within OBS, we can try to play around with the settings. And this is today's goal. So in this video, we will start to set up our 3-scene setup. Remember that we have a main screen with a talking head, maybe some background. We will have a shared screen with a talking head in the bottom left corner or wherever you want to place yourself there, and any content you want to use for your online teaching. And we have a third scene, an optional scene depending on your individual setup, that is an overhead camera, also with a talking head, a multiple cam setup. To enable us to do so and to make life easier for us, we will create a so-called nested scene. We will add our main webcam as a nested scene to OBS. How do we do that? In OBS, go down to Scenes. To add a new scene, click on Add Scene, and we're going to call this as follows. Brackets, NS, close brackets, main camera. Now what does NS mean? Because this will help you to organize your scenes and sources in a much better way if you use some kind of organizing system. In this case, NS means nested scene. What is a nested scene? A nested scene is a scene with one single source in it, and then you can use that scene that contains that one single source as a source in other scenes. That is one major advantage. If you were to include your main camera in each individual scene as a source, so as a direct source, as a video capture device, then you would, if you wanted to change anything to the camera across all the scenes that you have created, and there might be a lot of those eventually, you are ending up in needing to change the main camera properties in every individual scene because it's not global. However, if you're defining all the presets for your webcam in an individual scene and then you use that scene in all other scenes instead of directly using the webcam as a source, then you only need to change. If you want to make any changes, so for instance to the coloring scheme, to the perspective, to quality, etc., in the nested scene, and all the changes will filter through to all the scenes that use the nested scenes with the camera inside. So that's what we're going to do, and to be sure that we know what's what, we call this NS nested scene. You can come up with any kind of system there that you want to use for yourself. So this is now of course an empty scene, and in that empty scene we are going to add our main camera. To do so, we go over to the sources and we're going to add a scene named the video capture device. And we're going to call this, so for instance I give this the name of my camera, Webcam C920. I click OK. And now I'm selecting my main camera there. So you see me reappearing, and because I don't have a filter on, you actually see my green screen here in the background. So what you can do here, you click deactivate when not showing. That means when you're calling up a scene where your webcam is not included, then the webcam is getting deactivated. It switches off. Within the properties for my webcam, I can fiddle around with some of the settings. Let's start right here on the top. Let's start with the in-property settings. So we scroll down a little bit. We are going to change the resolution frames per second type from device default to custom. The camera will disappear because it is waiting for input. Now we need to change the resolution. Since our output resolution that I suggested is 1920 by 1080, I suggest to put the camera that way too, and you will immediately see an improvement in the quality. First, we're going to do a couple of changes in here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this to the side. You actually see the changes in a bigger window. So first thing that I'm going to do is I have deactivate when not showing on. And what you need to change is the resolution, which has changed that. Then I would match the output FPS, because the output FPS, the frames per second you have set in the second video, if you followed my steps there, to 30 frames per second. That means if you leave that settings here, match output FPS, then whenever you do changes in the settings to these frames per second, then this will be reflected here in sources as well that pick up on that setting. I leave it at that because for no reason to have a different FPS at this point. The video formats would be set on any. You can try different video formats here. We have YUY2, MJPEG, and we have H.264. You can start experimenting with this. So if I change, for instance, it's to YUY2, you see that this is quite laggy and it's not a good video format for my cam. If I change it to MJPEG, it's much more smooth. There's no lag in there. So again, if you experience issues with something coarsey as you just saw, go in here and change the video format. MJPEG works for me very well, so I leave it at that. The color space would be set at default initially. I recommend put it on 709, and that's the higher one, that's the better one. And the color range I recommend put on full. There's no reason to keep it on partial. I would leave buffering at auto detect. OBS does a very good job to buffer frames in order to avoid lags in your feed. Down here you also have an audio output mode. A lot of webcams have also microphones built in with varying quality, and they can also emit sound. I leave it at capture audio only. It will show in the audio mixer. I typically disable the audio mixer, but I'd like to keep it as a backup audio device in case any of my other audio devices fail. So it's a backup here. And then I'm not closing that yet, because now I'm going into configure video. In configure video, there's a couple of settings in here that I highly recommend having a closer look at and playing around with. You see here that we have two tabs, and just let me move this just over to here. So you need to see now a small window with me and with a large window. The first thing I would change, go to the second tab and unselect the autofocus. Unselecting the autofocus feature has very big benefits if you're in a small home studio setup like I am. A very small room here, don't have much space. So when I do recordings, I sit and I'm pretty much always at the same constant distance to the webcam. So there's no reason to have autofocus on. If autofocus is on, then OBS and the camera will still try to put you in focus, and just with slight movements you can be out of focus, in the focus. You want to avoid that because it tends to not look very good. Try which focus is best. So I'm already the lowest setting, but you see that my focus here is very blurry. So for me, there's no reason to change that, but I want to keep that setting as constant setting. The other settings I would recommend playing around with. I mean, play around with all the settings, see how things improve or get worse, and learn from it. One of the settings I would have a look at is exposure, and then on the other tab, brightness and gain. So what do these do? What does exposure do? Exposure opens a lens basically, and what it does is, if you play around with the exposure setting, it is telling your camera to let more of the already existing light in. So if you have natural light, definitely have a gander at the exposure setting, because it might really improve your webcam image. So I'm going to just go ahead and do that. I'm going to unselect auto exposure and see if it makes any improvements, show you what it does. So this is basically overexposing my camera to the existing light. And you see it gets a bit laggy here, or I can make myself very dark to the point that I'm disappearing. For my settings here, there's no reason to actually change anything there. It's fine. So I actually click it on auto. You can see in my case, it does a very good job in finding the right setting. If at any point you play around with the settings to a point where you say, I can't remember my initial settings, what's happening, I need to set everything, I need to reset my settings to start anew, then you always have a default button here. You can click, and then it just defaults back. Now the brightness setting is an artificial increase in the light. You see that this is also making things a bit brighter, less laggy, but it does not look very good. So I'm going to move it back down to 128 where it was. Gain is another setting that you might want to have a look at. In my case, gain here does not have an auto enabled. Gain means gain increases or decreases the sensitivity of your camera to the light. In most cases, when you play around with the gain setting, it doesn't actually do anything because brightness and exposure already rule the roost on how bright or dark your image is. If you move it up and you see a change, it gets a bit more coursey. Yeah? So I will just leave it where it was. And you can play around with the other settings. Saturation will just add a lot of color to yourself. So I'm changing my sharpness a little bit. And the sharpness here, as you can probably see, gets much better. I put it on 180. And this is a very good sharp image here. Just play around with the settings, see what works for you, for your webcam. And if you're getting completely lost in what you've changed, click on default and it reverts back. I click on apply and OK, and I click on OK here, and now I want to have actually this image here as a large image. So I click here, right click on the webcam, I go to transform, and then I click on fit to screen. So I'm going ahead and right click on my webcam and now click on filters. You have various filters here. You have audio video filters and you have effect filters. And when I want to go for effect filters. In the effect filters, we're going to add something called a LUT, so-called look up table. This is a file, basically an image, that has a color scheme on it. Click on the plus and apply LUT. You can give this LUT a name. We leave it as apply LUT. Click OK. And now you can select some predefined LUTs that come with OBS. You can also search online and find free LUTs on many repositories that you can then basically copy paste and then try out, and they give you very fancy effects. So let's have a look at a few of those. Let's click here on path, and it takes you to the default folder. And this is how the LUTs look like. And by default, you have a black and white LUT, grayscale, you have original, posterize, red isolated, and teal lows, orange highs. So let's have a look at some of those. Let's click on black and white LUT, click on open, and you see what that does. It turns this into something a bit spooky. Yeah. You can also change the amount the LUT should be applied. If you turn it all the way down, you're basically back at your previous image. If you want to keep the LUT, but you don't want to use it as in a specific setting, you go to the effect filter and you just tick it off. Simple as that. Let's have a look at a different LUT. Maybe the grayscale LUT looks better. Yeah, so the grayscale LUT, that looks very, very good. Actually, I like this kind of LUT a lot. Let me show you other LUTs. The red isolated, for instance, gives you that kind of imagery. I also kind of like this, especially if you're wearing something red. So maybe one more. How about posterize? You can posterize. You look like this, so very artsy. Might be used for that. And teal, those orange, makes you look a bit odd. I'm gonna go back to the grayscale and click on OK, but I want to have it switched off at the moment. Yeah, so I'm good with that. What we're going to do last, is the final point in this video, is to quickly set up a multiple webcam setting, which basically means my overhead cam as well as my main cam on one screen. And what I would suggest is that we're also creating a nested scene for that. So click on add scene, a nested scene, NS, overhead cam. Look at that. Then you add a source, just as before, video capture device. So I'm going to call it overhead view. Yeah, and now I'm picking up my camera here. And then I'm setting my resolution custom. That means I go for custom here. It will disappear just as before the main cam. I'm picking 1920 by 1080. Match output FPS, video format, MJPEG. That's what this camera is capable of. 709 as my color space, preferable, and full color range. Like so. Now I'm clicking on OK. And I'm going to do a couple of transformations because like this, it looks a bit odd. Of course, this is how the webcam is pointed down. I want to have it flipped. I want to have it turned. So we're going to transform this cam a bit. So first and foremost, we are going to fit it to screen. Then we're going back into transform, again by right-clicking, transform, and then we're going to flip it horizontally and vertically. You see what it does. Currently, it is somewhat mirrored twice. So I'm going to flip it horizontally. That's what that does. And then I'm going to flip it using transform vertically. And now this looks as if somebody is looking over my shoulder. I'm going to use that in a scene because it's a nested scene. I'm going to go to my overhead cam scene. I'm going to add a source, namely the scene is a source. I'm going to add my overhead cam. And then I'm going to add my main cam. Also a nested scene, as we recall. That's going to overlap this. I'm going to resize this quite considerably so. Cropping it, we know how to do that already, don't we? Alt key down, and you actually, if I do this, you can actually see me doing it. So I Alt key down, and then I am just cropping that window here. I'm gonna give myself not a lot of space here, so you might put yourself down here in the corner and then just see what size works best for you. So you might be just here large enough so you demonstrate things here, on your desk, and at the same time you are visible. So that's basically our third scene pretty much set up. We just need to work with the audio, which will be the topic of a separate video. Now, you might want to get a little bit organized here on the side already. Recall that our second screen will be a small webcam with content in the background. We do this separately in a video. So what we're going to do here, what I like doing, you can give this a little divider here, dividing line, to keep your nested scenes apart from your main used scenes. How can you do that? It's actually very, very simple. You're creating an empty scene, and then you do something like this. Give this a couple of asterisks, long enough. Click on OK, and then you move this scene up, and you see this is like a divider. It's just an empty scene that you give a name that serves as a dividing line. And you have a view here with yourself in the screen. Again, you can put yourself, of course, with the green screen, it's this added nice touch to it, because you're actually superimposed on the content. The content is right behind you. But you can make do without a green screen very well, actually. If you have a natural background here, in my case it looks a bit off now because I have the green screen actually showing as green screen. But you can give yourself a border here as well. You can make yourself smaller. You can move yourself around the screen. You could even be up here if you wanted to. You can do something like this. So here's an idea. I move myself on the side and I make this window actually smaller. I crop this a little bit. And you see that I'm basically in my content here. So move this over here. And you can actually do something like this, which is a nice effect as well. Yeah. So again, that's the beauty of OBS. You can compose your screen and the layout according to your requirements. Yeah. Now over to you. My question of the day: what webcam are you currently using? What webcam have you been using for your online teaching and your recordings last year? Are you thinking about upgrading your webcam, or are you happy with what you have? Comment below and let me know. If you have any questions about anything I have covered in this video, feel free to leave a comment as well. By the way, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to get the latest tips and tutorials to help you build your digital online presence. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay hungry for new skills. Bye.